evening, ladies and gentlemen. You're watching India Tonight with me, Sumita Karir, and as always, my colleague Nivetna Prabhu. We're both joining you from our Delhi studios, and tonight the focus is on Donald Trump's yet another tweet talking about negotiations that are currently going on between the United States and India so far as a trade deal is concerned. In fact, on the back of that, the Nifty index is experiencing a roller coaster ride. It's driven by mixed signals from Donald Trump. In fact, in a surprising move, Donald Trump, like I stated, he's urged not just the fact that negotiations are currently going on between the United States and India, but also the fact that he's reportedly urged the European Union to impose tariffs on Indian goods, citing trade imbalances and buying Russian oil, while simultaneously announcing the resumption of trade negotiations with India to address ongoing disputes. And these developments have left investors cautious, with the Nifty closing slightly up at 24,563 mark, and that really reflects volatility amidst global trade uncertainties. But beyond the rhetoric, what does this mean for India and the United States, and can trade equations be reset between both the countries? To discuss these big questions, we're now joined by Jayant Dasgupta, former ambassador and representative of India to the WTO. He's joining us from London, and Sunil Subramaniam, he's a market expert from Singapore. Nivetna?
Absolutely, Sumita. In fact, as you did introduce our guests as well, let me also take the opportunity to thank the both of you for taking the time out, and great to have both of you back on our show, gentlemen. But Ambassador Dasgupta, let me begin with you. What does it tell you that in fact Trump pairs personal praise for Modi with structural hostility to Indian trade? Is this clearly a case of personality-driven diplomacy where leaders flatter each other, or is it a calculated effort to keep India politically close while economically squeezed?
I think it is a bit of both, because if it had not been a question of a case of putting India under pressure and not letting the pressure get released, he wouldn't have asked the EU just, I think, yesterday to tariff India to the extent of 100% along with China. So he wants to keep the pressure on India, and at the same time, whatever remnants of the friendship, so-called friendship that he had with PM Modi, I think he wants to exploit that by extending an olive branch by saying that negotiations are on. Well, India has always said that negotiations have not been stopped, but it was President Trump who said that the negotiations will not take place unless India stopped buying oil from Russia. So India continues to buy oil from Russia. He has again gone back on what he had said a few weeks ago, and considering his unpredictability, I think this is par for the course.
Right, Ambassador Dasgupta, let's dwell upon this point a bit more. Now, why has Trump's tone and tenor changed? Why this change of heart, especially when his advisors like Peter Navarro are maligning India at the drop of a hat almost every day? And how much of this is about not losing India to the deepest, darkest China?
I think from all accounts, Peter Navarro is a bit of a loose cannon, and he is shooting off his mouth at the drop of a hat. The social media reports that he has, in fact, given credence to a fictitious economist called Ron Vara, which is a play on the words of his own surname. And he keeps quoting Ron Vara and saying that, he has this distinguished economist has said this and that, etc. So I don't think we should set much store by what Peter Navarro says. He is just the guard dog of President Trump, who is let loose on, on the persons whom he dislikes for the moment. So I don't think too much of store should be said by what Peter Navarro says. As far as President Trump is concerned, he had said, that India and Russia have gone into the deepest, darkest, the embrace of the deepest, darkest nation just a few days ago after the SCO summit. So this is a kind of a turnaround. But I think President Trump has also been receiving a lot of criticism from within the Republican fold as well as in the US, saying, including Nikki Haley, who used to be his ambassador to the UN in his first term, who has said that India is a reliable and trustworthy ally, and we need India to counter China in the Indo-Pacific. And we have this comprehensive global partnership, strategic partnership agreement. So we should not, rile India in such a way that it undoes decades of very careful diplomacy, which was used to build up this relationship to the present level. So I think President Trump is also now waking up to this feeling that India can't be bullied, it can't be pushed around. And India, which was, I think, not making its stand very clear as to whether it would, to President Trump at least, it was not very clear whether India would succumb to all these threats and give in. But now that India has withstood this storm, and it is now quite confident that it will weather this storm. Of course, there would be costs to pay. I think President Trump has realized that his bullying tactics are not working, but he is still not giving up his pressure tactics by asking the EU to raise the ante on the purchase of Russian oil. So he's playing both sides, and he thinks that he will get India around. And just the other day, I think there was this statement by Howard Lutnick, the Treasury Secretary, who said that India would come around and say sorry. So he's doing all kinds of things, and at his behest, his aides are doing all these things. But I don't think this will really succeed. Outside the negotiating room. So whatever he has to negotiate
in fact,
has to...
as you make those imperative points and the carrot stick approach that we're looking at here, we will come back to you and decode that further. But Mr. Subramaniam, thank you once again for taking the time out, and more importantly being extremely patient while we've had the opportunity to come to you. From your vantage point, when you're looking at it, the markets in fact initially cheered Trump's post about resuming talks with India, but then we saw that volatility return once details of the tariffs and his comments on the EU surfaced. How do you interpret this zigzag in investor sentiment?
No, I think that let me also have my point of view around the whole Trump imbroglio, if I may say so. I think I largely agree with what Mr. Das Gupta
Yes, please do. Yes.
But I do have some subtle points of difference. So let me state. The first is that I think of Trump as a businessman, not as a president. Okay. Second is, I think he is the sole decision maker. I think all these people around him talking and this thing is just a part of his pressure tactics. Now, if you go back and read his book called The Art of Making a Deal, way back in 1987, you can see that it's all playing to plan. He believes that you make outrageous demands. He believes that you unsettle the opposition on the other side with all kinds of things, because then they will come down from their own position and come to a midway ground. So it's all a part of his business making position. So I view him as the chief business officer of America rather than as the president of America. That's number one. So number two is that just pardon me for saying so, that the 25% additional tariff has nothing to do with India. It is that we are a soft target. We are being used as a guinea pig. We are being used to slap us around to make Russia come to the talking table, which he succeeded in getting put into Alaska. But after that, this whole negotiation with the Russia-Ukraine matter has been a disaster. Russia has in fact counterattacked a huge amount. They've escalated. In fact, they've gone through drones through Poland to attack Ukraine. So clearly Trump's diplomacy has failed. And the only reason he tried to rush and fast track a solution was because he probably had his eyes on the Nobel Prize, which is going to be decided between October 13th and 18th. And now he knows that the war is nowhere close to ending, right? He's realized that he's fought a losing battle, and unnecessarily he has thrown an ally under the bus. So that's where the change in his tweet from saying, oh, we have lost India, to then again quickly two successive tweets where he is now praising India and saying the trade talks are on. So clearly India was just used as a tool. And even now, if you see, he wants to rope in the EU to do what he tried to do on his own because he realized he failed. And if you notice, when he's appealing to the EU or demanding from the EU, it's not only India. He's asking them to put sanctions on India and China. Because what happened was he could very well have something to China. But look at this situation. We have $47 billion of import net trade deficit to India. He has almost $400 billion to China. American economy will come to a halt. That's why he is trying to patch up. He extended their
right, sir. But he could have very well attacked China. He could have very well attacked China and the European Union instead of attacking good friend India. And of course, he wants to have like a roadmap, at least a $500 billion roadmap by 2030. We'll come to you in just a bit to talk about the market perspective. But let me come to you, Ambassador Dasgupta. Let me talk to you about the legal angle. Does Donald Trump have any authority to negotiate any deal, considering the fact that the Supreme Court in the United States is expected to give a ruling and that might be against Donald Trump? Now, if that happens, what will it mean for India's negotiations and what does it mean for deals which have already been struck?
Well, Scott Bessent has already gone on record saying that if the Supreme Court were to rule against the Trump administration's decision, there would be a huge drain on the Treasury because at least half of the tariff charged would have to be returned immediately. So I think that is something which is staring him in the face. And this decision of extending the olive branch to India could very well have been, determined in part by his uncertainty at facing the Supreme Court and getting an adverse verdict in the next few months. So, and he knows that if he doesn't get a deal before the Supreme, an adverse verdict, if it were to come from the Supreme Court, then he'll never get it. And he will have to go back on all the other agreements as well. So he is, I think, clutching at straws. He is trying to make amends for his outrageous behavior, unpredictable behavior. And so there are several, reasons why he is doing what he is doing. And the other point I wanted to mention is that there are two other provisions in US legislation. One is the 1974 Trade Act and the 1962 Trade Expansion Act, under which he has, levied tariffs on steel, aluminum, and autos. Now, that calls for an investigation, and that investigation will have to be carried out. It will take time. It can't be done at the flick of a switch. As far as the 74 legislation is concerned, the Trade Act, it can only allow tariffs up to 15%, and that too for a period of 150 days. So it is, if he loses in the Supreme Court, it is unlikely that he will be able to again reimpose the tariffs within a short period of time.
Right, and we'll have to see how that gets unfolded. But in the event of that, if we take that as the background and that as the context, what would striking a deal with India mean for the United States at this juncture, and what can the United States offer to India?
Is that question addressed to me?
Yes, Ambassador, if you could answer. Yes, Ambassador.
Right. Okay. All right. From the early reports emanating after the negotiations were started way back in February, India had made a demand, which was not repeated later on by the press, which said that India's asked for reciprocity. That it also said that in exchange for the tariff concessions that it was willing to provide to the US would also reduce its tariffs to below pre-Trump levels, which was below December 2024 levels. And that is something which President Trump is not in any position to give, because he doesn't have a trade promotion authority from the Congress, because the Congress decides, as has been decided by the appeals court, that for raising tariffs, the congressional approval is required. Even for reducing tariffs, it is required. It is required more so. So he doesn't have that authority. So India had apparently, this is my reading, had said that, all right, if you don't have it now, then you give us a timeline by which time you will get it from the US Congress, and then you will reduce your tariffs. I don't think he is in any position to reduce the tariffs, considering the MAGA support base and the people who are clamoring for, more predictability and a level playing field, and all the other agreements that he says he has signed, got the others to sign on. The EU, Japan, Korea, they will all ask for similar concessions. So what is preventing them from asking for similar concessions in areas of their choice? So I think this will lead to a whole lot of unraveling. So this is one major barrier that he will have to cross in order to pocket the offers that India has made, according to him, of zero duty or near zero duty tariffs on most items.
Right, Ambassador. Fair enough point. In fact, Sumita and I will come back to that to decode that further. But Mr. Subramaniam, coming back to you, given what you essentially said earlier, first, of course, as to how you view him, clearly as a businessman and not really the president. But what I was asking you initially, if you could draw that into perspective as to how you're interpreting this zigzag in investor sentiment.
No, I think that to call this a zigzag in investor sentiment, I think is not wholly right. Because if you look at post-August 15th, when we announced the GST, still FIIs have been net sellers to the extent of 1,000 to 1,500 crores a day. Now, yesterday they turned positive 2,000 crores, and today's data, as I saw the provisional data, they're only 100 crores negative. So I don't think there is a real zigzag, and I think that this easing of the selling pressure by the FIIs today was a marginal negative. I think they are seeing this as the green lights, as a light at the end of the tunnel. Of course, they will need more clarity, but this change in Mr. Trump's approach towards India specifically, he's trying to rope in the EU. It means that he's admitting failure on his part of achieving this. So to that extent, and mind you, we're all forgetting that EU is the largest buyer of gas from Russia. They have pipeline through which it comes. They are in no way to position to put sanctions. So I view all of this as positive, that what he's doing is admitting his failure to solve the Russia-Ukraine crisis and to use India as a leveraging tool. He's realized that he's pushed India into a corner towards China. He wants to retrieve that back. So he's now making amendments, and he's talking about the trade deals specifically now. So I view all of those as positive. And I don't see the zigzag is only because there was profit booking in the counters which had run up post the Independence Day announcement on GST. So if you see the sectors which actually gave up gains were actually auto, consumption, and FMCG and the like. So I think that, and the FIS coming back is clearly seen in the recovery in the IT shares. Yesterday 2.5% up, today 2.5% up. So clearly FIS, when they come in, they would like to have IT on their portfolios. So I don't see this, that I see this Trump's two successive tweets favoring India as actually a positive, and FIs would take that into consideration. The zigzag has happened because of domestic investors, mutual funds, and insurance companies reallocating their portfolio. Sectoral shifting is happening. So my read is that overall, what Mr. Trump is doing now is being seen very positively and will have its impact on the market in the coming days.
All right, so you're seeing this kind of positive sentiment that is expected to continue over the next couple of days, given the kind of tweets that we've seen from both the sides. A thaw has been achieved. But Mr. Subramaniam, let me ask you another question. What's the kind of reaction do you expect from the markets if a 25% tariff cut is what India essentially ends up getting from the United States so far as these next set of negotiations between the two countries are concerned?
Yeah, then if you see, compared to Bangladesh, Vietnam, and our competing countries, they are at around 18 to 20%, right? So this 5% can easily be compensated through the GST cut that's happened, through the export promotion initiatives that the government is doing, including cheaper export finance and a bit of rupee depreciation. So I think that 5 to 6% gap with our competitors can easily be compensated. And I would see that the market would view a 25% release of this tariff from 50 to 25 as a huge positive way for the way forward.
Back. We're going to come back to you, but before we continue that conversation, let's listen into what Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal had to say as far as India's trade negotiations are concerned.
We've concluded a very robust, fair, equitable and balanced free trade agreement with UK last month. Both the Prime Ministers were present when my good friend and then Trade Minister Jonathan Reynolds and I inked the free trade agreement with them, with UK. We are in active dialogue with the United States of America, with New Zealand. Qatar and I will be finalizing the terms of reference, I think, first week of October.
Ambassador, we essentially heard what Piyush Goyal had to say. I want to understand from your vantage point, how are you reading into that?
I think India never said that we are shutting the door to negotiations. So we have always shown a willingness to carry on with the negotiations, because only through negotiations can a deal emerge. So we are not turning a blind eye to that. But it was President Trump who had called it off, the visit of the US delegation for the 6th round of talks. And now he's saying that negotiations are on. Of course, apart from the trade negotiators, talks at the diplomatic level were continuing. And perhaps at the level of, track 2 kind of a diplomacy was also going on. We have also engaged a public relations firm with which one of the high-ranking US officials in the current Trump administration was associated. She was, I'm forgetting her name. She was associated with this firm for very long. So they have, the principal of this firm has had a meeting with, I think, President Trump himself or some important members of his cabinet. So all these efforts are on. But we have to see what are the offers that the US makes and what are the demands that it places on India, further to the demands that it had already placed, and whether it withdraws this condition about India not buying Russian oil and then rolls back this 25%. Because if this 25% is on, I think there is no point in negotiating with the US.
Absolutely, Ambassador. Given the fact that India was initially pinning its hopes on the United States giving a 10% tariff letter to India. So let me ask you, Mr. Subramaniam, is there a possibility of India getting a 10% as a tariff rate anytime soon in the near future, if not immediately? And how are investors looking at that story?
I think the 10% reduction would be difficult because India is not going to allow access to agriculture area, dairy, as well as genetically modified products to come in. And for America, that's important to them because that's the only place, because of mechanization, that American products are competitive. Otherwise, America's labor manufacturing cost is $30 an hour. We are at $1.50. So American products will not be competitive being sold to India unless there's huge mechanization, which happens for them in agriculture. And that's why he's keen, because that's one product that the Indian middle class can buy. Now, India opening the door to Harley Davidson and to high-end liquor and all of that, that we have a very polarized economy. 10% of the population takes about 60% of the national income. So then that's a 14 crore people market that essentially American products can target, as opposed to agriculture, which is a larger. And that's a red line for us. So I think we have to get to 10%. There has to be some kind of wire media, which politically will be suicide if any government in India agrees to it. So I think the hopes of getting to a 10% are not very, very clear. We will do interim deals circumventing this on all other areas. And one thing which India could do is to buy oil and gas from America. So that would be a huge thing for America, because oil prices are internationally fixed. So it's not that American oil is that much costlier than Russian oil, or Russian oil without a discount or anything like that. So I think there are ways forward, but to say that to get to 10%, we would be a most favored nation, and that without us opening up access to our middle class and to our larger market, I think it's difficult. So let's not lay our hopes on getting to 10 very time soon, but at around 25, maybe even 20 is a realistic possibility.
All right, so not laying all those eggs in one basket, Mr. Subramaniam, essentially, if you were to look at it that way. But Ambassador and Mr. Subramaniam, what I want to also talk about is what the Prime Minister has said here, right? And he's spoken about unlocking limitless potential with the US. But Ambassador, let me come to you first. How realistic is that optimism when Washington is, of course, simultaneously pursuing punitive action in multiple forums, including the EU and the Supreme Court? And what I want to know is how should India separate the rhetoric from the hard reality that we know?
It's very difficult to separate the two because President Trump himself doesn't know what kind of a statement he'll come out with tomorrow or the day after. So one of the, I think, obstacles to achieving that 500 billion bilateral trade target by 2030 is the predictability aspect. You know, if you say that, all right, it will be 10% or 15% or 20%, then India can Indian entrepreneurs, businessmen can plan for that, factor it in. But not that it is going to be easy with 10% or 15% tariffs, but at least they can plan for it. But if you keep, holding out threats and egging on the Europeans to impose 100% tariffs and trying to destroy our market, and mind you, our bilateral trade with the EU is the largest for India in the world. So to kind of do that, I don't think is going to be a positive action on his part, and it is not going to help us achieve that 500 billion target in any way, or to make substantial progress in that direction during his tenure. So first of all, he has to lay down a transparent and predictable policy framework. He's saying, for instance, that for all the repatriation of remittances from the US to other countries, there would be a tax. He has now, in fact, said that for H-1B visa holders all over the world, 25% of the salaries paid to such workers coming into the US will have to be paid to the treasury by way of tax. Now, all these things are going to affect India badly. Other countries are also going to get affected, but India gets about 28% of its inward remittances from the US. So let us, view this whole thing in perspective. If he continues with his unpredictable ways and keeps holding out one threat after the other, I don't think the chances of achieving this 2030 target of 500 billion is going to be a realistic one.
Right. In fact, how that's going to be navigated, essentially, what remains to be seen. But Mr. Subramaniam, talking about the same point, given what the Prime Minister has just said about calling it a natural partnership also, do you think it's going to translate into tangible confidence for foreign institutional investors, or is the market waiting for concrete policy moves?
No, I think that definitely is going to tilt the sentiment in favor. And I'll tell you why. Because this has been a diplomatic win for India. We have to give it to Mr. Modi and his team for what I would call as an iron hand in a velvet glove. We have taken tough actions like going ahead and getting closer to Russia and China, doing a GST on our own, getting the Atmanirbhar Bharat and everything on that. But we've been velvety when it comes to US. We have not raised any kind of things. We have not countered their word with our word. I think brilliant diplomatic win for India. And what's happened is that Mr. Trump has realized that for the short-term gain of perhaps a Nobel Prize, he has put a long-term relationship at the crucible. Why? Because, see, first of all, politically, India, Quad, we are a key part of the anti-China force. Second, over a decade, if you look at it, if their $400 billion trade deficit with China has to be substituted, US manufacturing cannot overnight do that. So they have to buy from another country which has the population and which has low-cost labor, and that's India. Only thing is, this time the share of the savings will have to be more equitable than the way China did with the US. That's it. So I do see that definitely a deal will be there in the making, because Mr. Trump took a stance, like I said earlier, he used India as a tool for the Russia-Ukraine part. It was not so much anti-India there at the second 25%. So he realized his mistake.
Right,
He's realized
Mr.
he's not succeeded. So,
Right, Mr.
I'm saying
Subramaniam, but India is not playing ball. India is not playing ball and is going to negotiate on its own terms and conditions. From a market perspective, just want to also understand how should businesses and investors now navigate the kind of uncertainty that we're seeing at the moment, and of course, something that we're going to be seeing in the near future at least, and where do you see pockets of opportunity?
So basically, I think that Indian businesses should see that this is the light at the end of the tunnel, that we are now going to get to a solution sooner rather than later. And to that extent, now they should start investing towards building up to the US exports, because that will come back on track. And I think from an investments perspective, all the beating down of the export oriented sectors means that now there is value in those sectors, because any deal that we come from 50 down to 25 or 20 is going to be a huge positive. So I would say take a contra call, and all those sectors which have been beaten down because of the tariff fears should now be added to the portfolio. Buy on dips over the period, because when this deal does get signed in whatever form, those stocks and sectors are going to rally. So this is the time now. There is a green signal out there. Use that opportunity to start accumulating tariff impacted and export oriented sectors. Simple and straight.
Right, so export-oriented sectors are likely going to be back in focus so far as the markets are concerned. We'll have to see how investors really move their monies and how the markets are going to react to the developments over the next couple of weeks. That'll be very interesting to watch out from, not just a market standpoint, from a geopolitical perspective. Also, on that note, gentlemen, thank you very much for taking the time out and speaking to us here on ET Now on this big developing story. But for the moment, ladies and gentlemen, it's now time for us to slip into a very short break, but lots more coming up on the other side. You don't go anywhere.